2025 AMA's committee meeting for December 15th. I'm one of your co-chairs, Tim Tomier, and with us as always is co-chair Warren Tenney. And so thanks for sticking with us. We've been in fairly frequent meetings as the year has come to an end and as we're heading into 2021, and we appreciate you being with us. Next slide. Our agenda for today. So, of course, the welcome and committee's progress on our objectives. So we do welcome you. We do thank your participation. It's been quite a few people that have been participating, well over 100 at times. And so that shows a lot of interest in our topics and what we're trying to cover here. And we've been meeting monthly since October, so and with a lot of comments and feedback in between. So we appreciate your ongoing commitment to this committee and to helping define the challenging issues. Just quick little status update. As you're aware, we finalized 3 issue briefs earlier this summer. Hopefully they won't turn into beefs. It's briefs. We addressed exempt wells, hydrologic disconnect, and unreplenished groundwater withdrawals. And for the last several meetings, we've been discussing CAGRD issues in the context of the Assured Water Supply Program. That's been ongoing since August, and there's a lot of perspectives on those issues and/or how to frame or phrase those issues so that we can have meaningful conversation moving forward. And we've also been discussing more recently another issue brief on the management structure of the AMAs post 2025. 2 weeks ago, Warren made a presentation before the Governor's Water Council meeting, giving them an update on where we're at. Our original plan was to have the slate of issue briefs ready for that December meeting, but it's better to do it right than having to redo things if we didn't quite get where we felt we had a pretty broad consensus. So that's the process we're in now, is to try to finalize the final issue briefs and then go to the March council meeting. And we believe we're well on track to do this. We're really hopeful we can get some good outcomes today, possibly a couple meetings after in the early part of 21 heading up to March. We anticipate bulk of this meeting will be on item 2, which is the discussion of draft issue statements and defining issues related to the Assured Water Supply Program and the CAGRD. We've been really, our intention's been how to direct the concerns expressed about the Assured Water Program and the CAGRD, and to look forward to how both can continue to have positive roles for the sustainable use of groundwater and renewable supplies in the AMAs well into the future. And we think that's a reasonable thing to target. There's been robust discussion, which we greatly appreciate. And we believe that discussion has been very helpful in increasing understanding of various perspectives. We will then finish today's discussion on the AMA management structure brief and then talk again about our next steps. So once again, we appreciate your participation in helping to shape and develop each issue. Again, please let us know if you'd like to comment in the chat, or go ahead and leave a comment directly in the chat and it'll be acknowledged. And as Warren and I have been working with ADWR and CAGRD and others, we appreciate your stamina, because we know that the next phase, devoted to developing new strategies and solutions to address these issues, will require a large effort by all involved. Next slide. So we'll begin with a review of the last committee meeting from November 2nd. It's been a topic for the last 3 meetings. At November 2nd, we reviewed the comments received from committee participants on the initial draft issue outline that we had distributed in October. We talked through the major themes that arose in those comments and then presented and discussed several draft issue statements. So as we're trying to characterize these issues, we're trying to have an issue statement that kind of captures the topic that we're then fleshing out in an issue brief. During that discussion, there were a few suggested issue statements, or at least concepts, were made even by committee participants as well. After the meeting, the co-chairs decided to produce a questionnaire to further solicit feedback and input, since written feedback has been very useful to us in giving an additional read for the temperature of the room, particularly since we're meeting virtually with over 120 participants. So we've been trying to balance all that input, and we thought that the survey would be a good way to kind of have all the voices really reacting to a set of comments, and then we could kind of build from there. The survey or the questionnaire generated productive written comments, and we received 18 responses to the questionnaire. We also received 2 separate comment letters, and the compilation of the questionnaire responses as well as the comment letters was posted to the ADWR website last week. So next slide, please. This is the results of the questionnaire, and there's just some basic information that we'd like to just kind of go over there. One is that there were a lot of different perspectives expressed through the questionnaire, but there's general acknowledgement that the Assured Water Supply Program and CHRD play an important role, and we should be discussing how to ensure they remain viable well beyond 2025. So it's looking at what is the status of things, but how can these constructs be even more productive or more beneficial in the future? But our challenge has been how best to describe those issues. So we found these diverse stakeholder viewpoints to be helpful in directing how to better define the issue statements. The questionnaire was phrased around 3 issue statements, A, B, or C, and we're asked which one would best advance this discussion. We found through the survey that most support for using both statement B and statement C. When you look at the pie chart in the kind of the yellowish color, you can say the largest response was to both statements B and C, but also statement B and statement C individually also had quite a bit of support. So the co-chairs and working with ADWR, we thought moving forward and really focusing in on both statements B and C kind of captured the input that we received through the questionnaire and did make sense from a standpoint of the other input we've been receiving. So we're using those 2 statements as a starting point for our discussion today. But we've begun to refocus around those 2 statements based on all the feedback, and we hope we're getting closer to general consensus. We really hope so. We're going to find out today. We also wanted to note that there were votes for statement A, which focused on improving the Assured Water Supply Program and CHRD to provide more options and more support to water users seeking to use renewable supplies over groundwater. We do think that those same concepts that were in statement A can be captured under B and C and will arise during the solutions phase. So for those of you that really supported or favored statement A, we feel that that message will not be lost as we develop the other 2, and we appreciate your feedback to ensure that that is the case. So with that, I'm going to ask for the next slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Co-Chair Warren Tinney.
Thank you, Tim. So as Tim pointed out, we'd like to focus on issue statement B and issue statement C. Our objective this afternoon is to discuss these statements and reach general support for each one so that we can begin to draft the respective issue briefs, one for each issue statement. We have worked hard to incorporate all the feedback as well as appreciate being able to consult with ADWR and CHRD staff throughout this process. We recognize that as we refine the issue statement, that we may be damned if we do and damned if we don't. We know we can continue debating the right word here or there, and yet we just don't want to end up going around and round and letting wordsmithing perfection get in the way of us making progress. So we, as Tim pointed out, we feel that we are quite close, and we really look forward to your feedback today so that we start drafting the issue briefs and then start the dialogue for developing strategies and solutions to address these issues. Having read through all of the responses and comments last week, Tim and I began working to refocus statements B and C to better align with the suggested edits and to help with today's discussion. We realize that we just shared the new verbiage with you last Friday. We are still very much open to your opinions and feedback so we can further edit and revise these issue statements. But we would like to first share with you how we used the questionnaire feedback to develop these revised statements. We will start off first by talking about statement B, discussing it, and then we'll go through statement C. And we trust you've had a chance to preview these when we sent them out last Friday, but even if you have not, we hope that this presentation, we feel like this presentation will bring you up to speed quickly. So next slide. So statement B, as was shown on the questionnaire. Again, we appreciate the comments we received, and I thought it would be good if we gave just kind of a highlight or a brief overview of some of the comments. Some of the things that were expressed include this should be reworded as more of a problem statement and highlight the more immediate concerns. How are we defining risk here? Another one was agree we should emphasize the assured water supply rules are the root of the problem and they apply to all AMAs, even those without CAGRD. This helps identify that the goals of the assured water supply program could further be defined to provide a path for transition to renewables. Another comment was the real issue behind statement B is the lack of renewable water supplies and infrastructure for outlying communities within the 3 county areas. Also, bullet 2 is a fact, not a risk, and is by design. It could instead reflect the need for renewable supplies in replacement of the one-time use of groundwater to solve the assured water supply determination. Another comment was water quality is a risk at all depths and should be stricken from the statement. And another one was this should include the risk that a physical groundwater supply may be unavailable to homeowners whose groundwater has only been proven once for the 100-year regulatory timeframe. So based on this feedback and all the comments we received, we then worked to try to improve or refine the wording of the statement. And so next slide, this is what was sent out on Friday. And this is the revised statement B. You can see this one is much shorter compared to the one from the questionnaire. Large areas of the AMAs remain groundwater dependent due to a lack of renewable water supplies and infrastructure, which creates uncertainties as groundwater supplies become more limited. Based on processing the feedback we received, we began by editing the first sentence to focus less on asserting risks associated with the Assured Water Supply Program and instead use language submitted by a participant on the fact that large areas of the AMAs remain groundwater dependent due to a lack of renewable supplies and infrastructure. Then we used the suggested term of uncertainties rather than saying risks. We had initially wanted to include sub-bullets like the statement in the questionnaire because we thought they gave a better sense of what was to be looked at under the issue statement. And many comments also agreed with that. But we thought we would first share with you this streamlined, more direct statement that was sent out on Friday. And then next slide. So here is the revised statement with 5 sub-bullets that were developed from the questionnaire feedback. We changed the sub-bullets into questions based on suggestions we had heard at the last meeting, and we envisioned that these questions could be included along with the issue statement, or they could be included in the text of the issue brief and then be addressed there. We retained the first bullet from statement B, but put it in question form. Since the second bullet was not expressing an uncertainty or a risk, we modified it to ask whether physical availability should continue to be one of the only limits to groundwater use and determinations. For bullet 3, we again took in your feedback, and rather than asserting that pumping to 1,000 or 1,100 feet is unsustainable, we made it a question on whether those rules should be revisited. Next, because of the primary issue statement now dealing with the lack of renewable supplies and infrastructure in large parts of the AMAs, we added this fourth bullet to question whether we should address any roadblocks that prevent access to these renewable supplies. And finally, we added a question that was expressed by some committee participants, and that asks, what are the risks to homeowners whose physical groundwater supplies may be depleted after the end of the regulatory 100-year timeframe? This felt like an important long-term post-2025 question being raised by the committee that should be included if this issue discussion is moving toward reevaluating the assured water supply rules. So what we'd like to do is to get your thoughts regarding statement B. What do you think about the revised overall statement that is in bold? Do you feel these sub-bullets should be included along with the issue statement, or just understand that they would be addressed in the text of the issue brief? So would like to hear your thoughts at this time. And I know that this is not a shy group, so please don't hesitate.
Lauren, it looks like Pam Muse has a comment in the chat.
Oh, okay, great.
Her comment is, it's better to have these items phrased as questions. And then Robert Anderson has a question about the first two bullets.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. I was having trouble seeing the chat, so thank you. Rob.
So on the first bullet, Warren, how does growth occur on unreplenished groundwater? I guess maybe that refers to if GRD doesn't perform, or I didn't quite understand that.
The thought there was just, again, of that new growth. Currently, you can have withdrawals of groundwater, and under the Assured Water Supply Program, yes, it's theoretically supposed to be replenished, but we were throwing in also unreplenished based on groundwater allowances.
Okay. I guess you could have growth that's not associated with subdivisions would not have to be replenished. I guess that's correct. Okay, on the second bullet, I guess the phrasing is okay. One of the only limits to groundwater use. I don't think it's very well understood that if CAGRD does not perform either, probably the biggest thing is the plan of operation. That is a functional limit on using groundwater to grow, even if you can demonstrate physical availability. So I don't know if that requires a clarification here, because the statement as it's written is actually accurate. One of the only, it's not the only, so that's accurate, but it doesn't reflect probably the larger limitation, which is the plan of operation. That's all I had.
Okay, and then just as a quick follow-up, Rob, so with the first one, you know, the groundwater allowances are still issued and used by DRD members, was part of
Good point.
the reason for that. And then also, as far as the plan of operation, you're right in regards with the CAGRD. And we also were hoping that this issue statement B would also expand, you know, cover issues related with the assured water supply rules, not just only directly related to the CAGRD.
I appreciate that. That was one of our comments, so I appreciate that. And I would say that the remaining 3 bullets are good questions to ask. So I'll mute myself.
Yeah, and then we have a question from Terry Sue Rossi, or I guess wants to talk about the bullets. And again, we're wanting to get your thoughts of whether the bullets really need to be part of the issue statement, or just recognize that these are key points that would be raised or would be noted in the issue brief. So Terry Sue?
Whoops. I guess I can't get the video to start. Sorry about that. I'm not sure. Oh, there it goes. First of all, I think that this is a lot improved. So thank you very much for going through the exercise of improving on it. I think it's a big improvement. I was curious about, on the bolded part, it says which creates uncertainties. Do you have some examples of what you mean by these uncertainties? And then I also have some things I'd like to talk about and by the way, I like having the questions, the sub questions relative to the bigger bolded statement. I think that's good.
So as a first response, let's see, Terry Sue, you might need to mute yourself. I think you, there we go. So we considered saying uncertainties in groundwater availability, but assumed that more limited would maybe cover it. I guess the real thing is, as there's less groundwater supplies, as those become more limited, then some of the uncertainties are, well, will we have enough water for into the future? Is this the right place for us to continue to develop? What type of issues might occur? All of the some of the things that are pointed out with the question there. We had originally used the word risk, and it was pointed out that it would be by one of the commenters in the feedback we got, that felt that uncertainties was a better word than to be using risk. And we made sense to us. And then you said you had some comments regarding the bullets.
Yeah, I like how the last 2 are formatted, because they are seeking more than just a yes or no response. And I'm wondering if we can reshape those first 3 questions so that they are will elicit more than just two words. One, you know, say a yes or a no. So, like, for example, to what degree should new groundwater withdrawals be used to support growth, or something like that? Or, you know, how should what is the role of physical availability in going forward within the assured water supply rules, just so that it's not in the context of a yes or no answer?
No, that's a good point. It's something we could try to do there. We certainly did not think that even if it was posed as a yes or no, that would be the end of the conversation. You know, that if the answer is yes, then let's talk further. If it's the answer no, let's still talk further of what the thinking was behind it. But that's a good suggestion there. We can, so Terry Sue, if I'm understanding correct, from your suggestion, you like the idea of having the bullets associated with the issue statement, just so that people have a better flavor of understanding what is being addressed by that issue statement, and better understanding what uncertainties we're referring to.
I think that the questions are a good way to help focus the conversation. And the first three questions, you could probably, I think, make those into a single question if you wanted to. If the question was a little bit, if you can figure out how to make the question broader, those are very, very specific questions. And I think in general, they're just getting at the idea of, how much groundwater should be permitted to be used in the assured water supply going forward and under what conditions, so it kind of gets to all of those ideas.
Right.
But I actually think that framing the issue in terms of questions is actually very helpful.
Okay. Thank you. And it looks like William or Bill Collings also concurs with you on that. Krista McJunkin asked a question, was asking for clarification on what we are doing with these issue statements, and what will they go to the Water Council for validation before we start working on solutions. So that what we have attempted to do from the beginning was that we wanted to this year look at issues, and and then put together a package of issue briefs that we would then take to the Governor's Water Council and present, saying these are issues that we feel deserve attention for ensuring that the AMAs after 2025 will continue to be managed well, and to get their the council's validation, and before we then start working on solutions. For these issue statements, we do need to need to still develop an issue brief, so we'll still be working with the committee on developing the issue brief, drafting it so that it can be part of the package that we then take to the Governor's Water Council. So I hope that answered your question, Krista, and provided some clarification for everybody. Dave, I see that you've got some questions. Do you want to just phrase it to us? Go ahead and voice it out loud.
Well, it's, I guess the question I have is the last part of the issue statement concerning the uncertainties as groundwater supplies become more limited. And is it that the physical water supply will be limited, or that the supplies will be limited because they're have already been pledged or will be pledged to an assured water supply, and that it will limit the availability of that groundwater for future assured water supply? Is that what we're talking about here?
Dave, I think it's a little of both, in that we know that groundwater is can be limited based on ownership, that it's already there's priorities for it, or the type of groundwater that it is, as well as, or that it, a better way of saying is, as you said, pledged, but and as well as access to it. But we also know that it is there's also physical limitations on it, as we're seeing some of the challenges based on modeling in the Pinal AMA and projections for the future. So I think it's kind of a little of all those things is the concern that there are uncertainties about groundwater supplies and looking forward. Did that help answer your question?
I think that helps, and I think Terry Sue has kind of put forth a question to you, or at least an example of broadening the questions 1 to 3 into a single question, which I think might help on that particular issue.
Yeah, so that's where it says, let me read it out loud for everyone. What is the role of physically available groundwater in meeting assured water supply demands post 2025? And go ahead, Terry Sue.
Oh, sorry.
I don't necessarily need to speak. I was just coming up with an example, just to make it broad enough and for it to include all the concepts that you see in bullets 1, 2, and 3. And also at the same time, I'm trying to make sure the answer doesn't, or the question doesn't embed the answer into the question.
Yes. Yeah, that's something we've been trying our best to avoid, and I appreciate also your attempt to move away from a yes or no. And so Kathy Ferris just added a suggestion that it's not just the role, but the consequences. So I guess we could say, what is the role and consequences of physically available groundwater in meeting assured water supply demands post 2025?
Warren, did you get the Dave Roberts one that was snuck in on you there?
Yes, we just spoke. Dave just spoke up on that one.
Okay, I was offline for a second there. Sorry.
No. Thanks for. I need all the help I can. Cynthia Campbell of Phoenix raises a question that the rephrasing that Terry Sue did loses an important concept about additional growth. Terry Sue, do you think we can keep working on that statement and maybe try to capture what Kathy and also Cynthia put in there?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does include the concept of additional growth because, it's all going forward. And I'm not quite sure how you'd want to slide in the term consequences. It didn't seem to fit if you say, what is the role and consequences of?
Yeah.
So maybe what is the role of physically available groundwater in meeting the assured water supply demands post 2025 and any consequences or something like that.
Okay. So we have some additional help with editing here from Nicole Clovis saying, what are the role and consequences of the use of groundwater to support new growth after 2025? I guess my initial thought is I'm wondering about the phrase about physically available, but I don't know if that's necessary. There's a couple of other support for that. Well, now 3 for that. Terry Sue, what do you think about Nicole's verbiage?
Well, I have a great deal of respect for Nicole's writing, but I'm having troubles with what are. It's more of a grammatical thing for me at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So what are the consequences makes sense, but what are the role and consequences? I'm struggling with that a little bit, but I'm not an English major, and I trust Nicole more than I trust myself. So I don't really have any substantive comment on it. I think this is workable. We lost the idea of it being assured water supply and the physical availability. That would be my only, but maybe that's okay that it's that way.
Okay. I think we would certainly be as we're digging in and working on this, those points are certainly going to be brought in. And I appreciate the idea of taking the first 3 bullets and trying to rephrase them so it's a little streamlined and it's not a yes or no question. Why don't we, for right now, plan on then replacing those first 3 bullets with Nicole's language, assuming that there's not any additional grammatical or anything else we need to do. And and then what we could do is go on from that. But I see Jake Lenderking has a comment. So Jake, please.
Thanks, Warren. And thanks, Warren and Tim, for all your work on this with the poll and all the administrative and background and thoughtfulness into it. It really shows, and really feel like we're having a really good meeting on it. I really do like the idea of having a question that's not presupposed with an answer. I really like Nicole's change as well. To me, that question really leads to the nexus of what I've been asking for is, let's look at the data a little bit. And if this is the kind of question we're posing, what are the role and consequences, to get at those consequences, I think we need to think through some of the data points and issues a little bit more as we create a whole brief. So I think we're heading in the right direction. I don't know if we're there 100%, but I do like the direction we're heading in. Thank you again for all your work behind the scenes and between the meetings. I know it must be significant.
Thank you, Jake. So on your point about data, I think that's one that we certainly would want to be utilizing and understanding the data that exists, that DWR has, that we can analyze and look at as we're working through these issues, particularly in developing strategies or solutions for them. So I see, Rob, you have a comment also?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Jake had just said, and also I'm good with the I think we're good with that reformulation of those 3 bullets, and with Nicole's language. I thought Nicole did a nice job with that. I do think that those sub points that are in those 3 bullets are things that, and I think Warren, you basically said this, but I think those are all points that we need to get into as we have discussions. But I do like the more general formulation that Nicole just gave us. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. And then Cynthia Campbell has a comment.
Sorry. Yeah, I do like Nicole's language in terms of putting it back into a specific question about growth. I have another question though, and I don't know that I have an opinion on this as much as just a question. In previous conversations, we've talked about whether or not there was a goal, a reason goal that the purpose of the GRD was a bridge. I know some people have talked about it as like a bridge to subsequent renewable supplies. And so the question becomes is it advisable to continue existing users on groundwater indefinitely? Which is kind of not the same as Nicole's question, which is also an important issue about new growth. But I guess I'm just teeing it up. Is that still an issue that people are concerned about? Or because if we are, I think then it gets lost with the way Nicole's question was phrased just at growth.
So I'm not sure if I have a real, I might have to think a little bit more about your question, but I guess my initial response would be that, in the overall issue statement where we're saying that large areas of the AMAs remain groundwater dependent due to a lack of renewable water supplies and infrastructure, as well as that bullet down, the fourth bullet, talking about roadblocks to that. I'm hoping that, and I would anticipate that the points that you bring up would still be brought up, would be discussed and looked at as we're moving forward through this. We had different opinions about the whole bridge reference. Some were supportive, some were very adamantly disliked it. So we just tried to find a way to still be able to talk about infrastructure, about renewable supplies, as well as the overall concern about uncertainties of groundwater supplies, and do it this way. So hopefully that's, we'll still be able to generate a lot of discussion, and definitely keeps the door open for us to look at a lot of strategies and solutions. I hope.
And now that you put it that way, Warren, that makes sense to me too. I'll withdraw my concern.
Okay. Thanks. I'm glad my initial response worked. So Terry Sue had a suggestion for the fourth bullet, where it would be written as, what roadblocks prevent access to renewable supplies and infrastructures in these groundwater dependent areas? And Jake says that he likes Terry Sue's suggestion for number 4. To my, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to say I'm good with it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's still working, does what we were wanting bullet number 4 to do. And then Jennifer Davidson, possible 3 bullets into 2. What are the consequences of continuing growth on new withdrawals of groundwater, and ought the role of assured water supply determinations be the only limits to groundwater? What is the availability of assured water supply determinations related to physical availability? So thoughts on this? I'm trying myself just to get my head wrapped around. So Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and speak up? And are you suggesting this in are you suggesting these 2 questions rather than the Nicole and Terry Sue suggestion?
It was just an attempt to expand upon what they said, and I thought in one sentence it was very much a run-on. So trying to take into consideration some of the other things people were saying as far as the availability, physical availability. So I just thought maybe instead of trying to squish them all into one, we put them into 2, and it was just a rewrite suggestion, that's all.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I would, there was a lot of comments of support for what Nicole had put together. So Nicole, Terry Sue, what's your thoughts on this?
I like the cleaner version. I'm becoming more attached to Nicole's version of the question. I think it's clean. I think it embodies all of these concepts. And I think it's broad enough to allow a rich conversation. So I'm liking Nicole's.
Okay, and Kathy Ferris wrote, I don't think insured water supply determinations are the only limits to groundwater. I guess thinking about a little bit more, Jennifer, I think your points, and I appreciate what you're trying to do here, and I think in the issue brief, we would certainly be expanding on these questions, and so I would hope that then we would be including all of that. So if it's okay, and then Jennifer just wrote no worries. So I think what we will do right now, for now, so that we can keep moving along, is we've got the revised issue statement, and then we'll take the first three bullets and rewrite them according to Nicole Clovis's question, one question. Number 4, we'll reword according to Terry Sue's comments, and let's you can still be thinking about it, but just for the sake of getting through the presentation, why don't we go ahead and move on to issue statement B. So that would be the next slide, please.
And Warren,
Yes.
I'm going to completely agree with you, and I'm going to go out on an emotional limb and say I think we're very close on that previous issue statement. I think we've got something.
I think so too. I just was a little nervous to say it actually out loud.
That's what I'm here for. I'm your co-chair.
So thanks for putting that out there. So in looking at issue statement C, you can see here is what was put with the questionnaire. And so we took the feedback from the questionnaire, and here are some, I'll read a few of the overall comments that we got. First, the statement is too vague, doesn't communicate the seriousness of the immediate and future challenges these programs face. Another one was, this is not a current issue, but should be addressed today before hitting a wall. Thus, why this fits in a post-2025 management discussion. Another one is, there is no guarantee that the CAGRD can obtain water indefinitely, and no incentive for provider to break away from CAGRD services. Another comment was, the CAGRD was created as a solution, so it should be touted as such. Another, the risk of CAGRD failing to supply water or the increasing cost of a dwindling supply of water is detrimental to the homeowner's property value and to Arizona's economy. Unknowing homeowners will be carrying the majority of the burden in the future. Another statement, development will remain beyond 100 years, but a water supply has only been secured for 100 years. Next one, the opening statement implies the assured water supply determinations need to be revised to reduce the CAGRD's future costs and CAGRD's ability to meet future replenishment. However, both of these are CAGRD concerns. So based on this feedback and all the other comments we received, we worked to try to improve the wording of the statement. So let's go to the next slide, please. So after processing this feedback and the other comments raised in our last 3 meetings, we began by striking the sentence. It did seem a bit vague and not getting straight to describing the issue that had been identified related to CAGRD. Instead, we started by noting the positive function of CAGRD in the 3 AMAs where it operates. Then we modified the second sentence to more directly state the long-term uncertainties, again replacing the word risk, faced by the CAGRD and its members. We received a number of comments concerned about the long-term outlook for its members, particularly the homeowners in member lands. So this new language is not hugely different from the original, but was an attempt to get straight to the point of the long-term uncertainties that we heard should be discussed today as we look out to the future for water management. So it now reads, the CAGRD provides a mechanism to replenish some of the assured water supply related groundwater use within 3 AMAs. However, the CAGRD and its members face long-term uncertainties in the availability and costs of renewable supplies for replenishment. Next slide. So last Friday, right after we sent out the agenda and revised statements for this meeting, we received input from Sandy Fabritz of Freeport-McMoRan, Cheryl Lombard of Valley Partnership, and Doug Dunham of EPCOR Water, who had been coordinating together their responses. They were very apologetic for being late to send in their feedback, but as we were reviewing their suggested language for Statement C, we thought they used verbiage that helped give maybe more clarity and preciseness for Statement C. So we thought it would be good to show it here in bold, merged in with the revised statement, to see what all of you think about this version as well. And so we just wanted to, first off, get your thoughts about the revised statement and whether this a little more verbiage that's been added to it. What do you think about it as for the revised statement? So thoughts on revised issue statement C or the revised issue statement C? Laura Granano.
Thank you, Warren.
Yes.
So I'll jump in here and share my thoughts. I guess although I do agree that the newer revised statement adds some specificity, I think I agree with some of the comments made about in the prior conversation with statement B. I think we want to maybe steer clear of identifying potential solutions in the issue statement itself. So I'd be a little more apt to stick with the original, the one above. That's a little broader in addressing the issue. So that makes sense. Happy to elaborate more if it doesn't.
No, thank you, Laura. Other thoughts? I have to confess, I have not had the time to be able to look at who is all on the meeting, so I don't know if Doug or Cheryl or Sandy might want to comment. I'm not sure if you're on the meeting. So Spencer Camps said that he agrees with Laura's comments. Doug is here. So Doug, would you like to make any comments? Or I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do want to give you a chance to comment if you'd like.
Actually, I think you do intend to put me on the spot. Yeah, I don't know if Sandy or if Cheryl is on here, but I'm just what we were trying to try to capture is, based on all the discussion has happened before, that's sort of skipping along all of these related issues tied to the GRD. So we try to kind of summarize all of that in one statement. It might be better flowing if this was broken up into some of your sub bullets that you've suggested on others, but again, we were trying to summarize in a much more general statement, all the different sub issues that were out there. And I mean, I think it's kind of self-explanatory what we were picking up on there, but if there's any other specifics, I'll be glad to chat to that.
Okay, thank you. And to answer Nicole's question, Nicole, the language that Sandy, Doug, and Cheryl had suggested is incorporated right here in the bold. So it's basically right after the CAGRD's replenishment obligations have raised concerns among some of the long-term viability of the use of the CAGRD, including supply availability to CAGRD, costs borne by CAGRD member versus cost of individual member pursuit of their own renewable supplies, sufficiency of ADWR oversight, and review criteria of CAGRD plans of operation. And then Haley Paul said, seems like the revised statement doesn't propose solutions. It seems like it's continuing the list of issues. So, you know, and then also I know that there's another dialogue that's been going on in here regarding a suggestion made by Kathy regarding, I believe, still referring to statement C. And so I'll circle back on that. But so I just wanted you to know I wasn't ignoring that, but wanted to, so I guess clearly if we kept the issue statement as here at the top, the original revised one, that it certainly would still include being able to talk about the points that are raised by what was suggested by Doug and Cheryl and Sandy. Eric Brown said, I like the idea of capturing the list of issues in a bullet list that Doug suggested. There doesn't appear to be any solutions in the Doug Sandy statement. And Kathy Ferris is suggesting that there isn't a need for C if you add another bullet to B. Oh, okay. Whoa, okay, so let me wrap my head around that one. So, now, Tim, I could use a little, I apologize if I missed that point earlier. So now I'm not sure if we continue to talk about statement C or if we want to go back to statement B as a way to just have one issue statement. I guess when we were preparing and had separated statement B and had a separate statement C, we were trying to look at, we just were thinking based on all the previous conversations that it was easier to kind of separate, have a discussion about groundwater and assured water supply rules, and then set aside and specifically then look at GRD with the specific issue regarding uncertainties on renewable supplies. But so Kathy, why don't you go ahead and speak up and
Hey,
go ahead, Kathy.
it just seemed to me that we could take the crux of issue statement C and have it just be another bullet in his issue statement B. So what the crux of it is the uncertainties in the availability and costs of renewable water supplies for replenishment. And what I was proposing is to just say, what are the uncertainties? Where did I long-term uncertainties in the availability and costs of renewable water supplies for replenishment, which seems to follow partly out of that other statement. I out of B. I don't think B is. I think C, we're trying to focus in on GRD, but I'm not sure the two need to be separate. So I was just trying to streamline it.
Okay. Amanda, could you move the slide back to back up one more? Right there. No, let's see. One forward. That one. Tim? Yeah. So, yeah, Tim.
What I was going to say is, I think what Kathy just described is workable. I think the bolded statement under B is broad enough that if we added that sub bullet that Kathy just described as a bullet here, then we could be down to one broad and inclusive issue statement, and what would ultimately be 4 to 5 bullets. If the three currently shown ones get collapsed, then we have bullet 2, bullet 3, and then this becomes a new bullet 4. I think it works, and it would. I think the issues rolled up in statement C fit under this umbrella of statement B, and then I think we're there. I got a woohoo from Terry Sue, which is great.
Yeah.
Pam used just input a comment. Could that take the focus away from all 5 AMAs and zero it in on the 3 CAPMAs? And is that what we want? I don't think that's what we want. But would it draw too much focus on 3 of the 5 AMAs is what I believe Pam's question is. I think, well, my gut is it would maybe perhaps that one particular section of the issue brief would only apply in that 3 county service area on the surface, but the other bullets / questions definitely are broad across all 5.
I would agree, Tim, that we could be able to still, especially as we describe it in the issue brief, make sure that it's understood that our intention here is to look at all, have this question look at, or have this issue statement apply to all 5 AMAs with the, and then having more of a focus on the, with the sub-bullet question that Kathy is proposing, having more of a focus on the 3 AMAs that have access to the GRD. I guess the one thing that I worry about, and just throw it out there, is are we missing any nuance about the cost being placed on GRD members, which we did hear from a lot of the committee members as a concern in regards with the CAGRD. And that's just something to think about of, are we kind of missing that, or could we still, I mean, certainly we could still be addressing it, but it just might take, we just would need to make sure that we're remembering it under this issue statement B. Cynthia Campbell asked the question, doesn't the Prescott AMA also have issues that have voiced regarding reliance on groundwater use. Yes, and therefore I believe that, I mean, we've thought all along that this issue statement B would be applying to all 5 AMAs. Is there any other? So, okay, we're getting a few more comments here. So, Nicole, what are the benefits of combining assured water statement issues B and CAGRD discussion C? Nicole, do you want to go ahead and elaborate or just maybe expound a little more on your question? And then Terry Sue would like to speak.
Sure. At first, when these issues got divided, I was reluctant, but I think over time it has made more sense to me to treat them separately. And the issues that relate to, the assured water supply program are certainly linked to CAGRD and vice versa. But I think that to some extent they're unique and separate, and it might make sense and make for more manageable issue papers if they are treated separately. But that being said, I'm certainly open to whatever achieves a greater consensus.
Thank you, Nicole. Terry Sue, and then Lauren Hickson had a comment, and then Rob will speak. So Terry Sue.
So I think one of the advantages of combining and doing the sub question is it's kind of related to the whole debate we all got in about, what was better, being designated or being certificate based. And we decided that we shouldn't be labeling those things because it creates misunderstandings. And I think that the same is true about the GRD stuff. So one of the concerns was, well, the GRD members have to pay, these enormous costs for the water supply. Well, the water supply costs what it's going to cost, whether the GRD buys it or whether the water provider buys it, and the customer is going to pay for it. And so in my mind, there's really no difference between the GRD purchasing a water supply and making that available through replenishment, or the water provider making it available through, say, recharge and recovery, or, the only difference is the water provider eventually can directly deliver that water to the customer. And so I feel like a lot of times the GRD kind of becomes a target. Either it becomes the target for being the solution, or it becomes the target for being the reason that there's a failure. And I think by actually kind of pulling that little thread out, we kind of avoid that problem.
Okay. And then Lauren Hickson, would you like to state your thoughts?
Sure. Essentially, when you were asking about the nuances in the statement and whether something might be lost, just that the focus of statement B was really the uncertainties as groundwater supplies become more limited, whereas the GRD's focus and issues seem to be related to the uncertainties of renewable supply availability for long-term availability and cost. So it seemed by combining them, we might have lacked that nuance of what the uncertainties are for the GRD.
Okay. Rob Anderson.
I have to confess that I've lost track a little bit of what the actual proposal on the table is in terms of combining the two. I wanted to echo what Terry Sue was saying. If we go back to statement B, it sounded like, I thought one of the important things that's missing from the existing statement C that was in the late proposal that came in was the concept of cost for GRD as opposed to cost for everybody else. And without that slide in front of me, I can't read exactly what it said, but I think that's one of the nuances I would not want to see lost is however we do this, if we combine it or we don't combine it, that the cost of acquiring renewable supplies is going to be what it is, and whether or not it's GRD or individual members getting it on their own, I think that's an important nuance and concept to have in there. So it might be helpful, Warren, if we went back. I'm not clear exactly what's on the table in terms of having a single statement B, but it would be that nuance that I would not want to lose.
Yeah, and that was referring to this reference about supply costs borne by CAGRD member versus cost of individual members' pursuit of their own renewable supplies.
Right, and in that concept really isn't in the circulated statement C, and it's in the one that Doug Dunham and Sandy and Cheryl put together.
Yeah, so let me real quick try to throw out what I understand to be the proposed suggestion about combining everything under the issue statement B. So you would have the statement here: large areas of AMAs remain groundwater dependent, da, 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 da. And then the first three questions become compressed into one question that says, what are the role and consequences of the use of groundwater to support new growth after 2025? The fourth bullet gets rephrased according to what had been suggested by Terry Sue. You keep the fifth bullet, and then there's the statement of what are the long-term uncertainties in the availability and costs of renewable supplies for replenishment. So that's what we're looking at. I see that Patrick Adams agrees with Lauren and Nicole. It would be unfortunate if combining the two issues were to sacrifice any clarity and specificity. And Eric Brown agrees with Nicole. Patrick or Eric, either of you would like to speak? Okay, I will then.
Sure. Well, sure. I'll
go ahead, Eric. Eric.
Sorry. Pregnant pause there. I think we are looking at kind of two different enough issues that they need to be separately stated. The CAGRD issue is related to the cost of replenishment, and issue statement B is much more related to the assured water supply requirements as well as physical availability. And so I think that those are so different that they deserve their own statements.
Okay, thank you. And then Doug says he agrees with Terry Sue. Water cost is water cost. And Simone, would you like to comment, or go ahead, Simone, if you'd like.
Oh, I don't have anything additional. I just think it's helpful to have the two separate statements so that we don't lose the detail.
Okay. And Pam? Pam thinks Nicole made a good point that the paper could be rather complex if we combined both ideas into one paper again. And then Pam, if you want to say anything in addition, just speak up. But also Jake Lenderking has a comment.
Thanks, Warren. I just wanted to emphasize that costs are exceptionally important topic. You know, I don't want to minimize them at all. You know, but we are talking about water management, not necessarily the costs. You know, if we wanted to get into costs, you know, we could debate it forever in a million different ways. And I really don't know that it should be part of it. And I'll just throw out an example, you know, the older supplies are generally cheaper. I think most of the folks here are aware, you know, some of the SRP supplies are rather inexpensive, and then there's some other added on SRP supplies that cost more. And then we have CAP, and now we have CAGRD. And, you know, if we have another bucket, it'll of course cost more. And if you have an older, more tenured water system like MWD in California, you have different buckets of water that cost exponentially more than what we have here. So I think it is very, very important, and I think we all have to think about that and evaluate it. But we should really probably just focus on water management and just keep it simple. Just you know, kind of what they were saying, Terry Sue and Doug. You know, it's going to cost what it's going to cost. Water providers have found ways, and customer, but we all are very, very cost conscious, and hard to tackle that in this committee, I think.
Yeah, and based on some of the comment, Jake, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Some of the feedback that we received regarding cost was more in regards to, maybe it had less to do with the actual cost, but more about who was going to be having to deal with those costs in the future, and that the concern that costs were only going to be increasing for homeowners as with the CAGRD having to acquire renewable supplies that we know are only going to cost more in the future. And so anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, that was kind of a theme running through. Eric Brown, and then Laura has some comments also.
Thanks. So the idea that water cost is a really great one, except that the issue isn't the cost, it's the cost transparency. And, you know, with CAGRD and the tax for replenishment, that transparency is very negligible. And as we all know, water management is very closely tied to the cost of operating the utility. Otherwise, we wouldn't have inclining block rate structures to give price signals for customers to reduce their water use. And so I think that issue can't be ignored or brushed aside. And I think it deserves a spotlight on it when we're discussing about these water management issues going forward.
Thanks, Eric. It also looks like Laura Gagnano had wanted to make a few comments.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Tim and Warren. I'm kind of going back and forth with folks on combination of C and B. I think I'm leaning toward that maybe it is better to keep them separate. Because I do think there's the availability of groundwater and versus availability of replenishment and renewable supplies. So I think I'm leaning towards keeping them separate. I know the costs issues have come up, and just to respond to Eric's comment, I think there's a lot of transparency on the rates on CAWCD's or CAGRD's rates.
Did you accidentally try to call me?
Sorry, I think we hear you, Terry. I think that that what I've read in the comments are more about homeowners, educating homeowners on what that they're members of the CAGRD and what that entails for them as a homeowner. So I think there's a lot of transparency in CAGRD's rates, but maybe more of an educational issue on the new home buyer. So I think that that's an issue that we want to clarify. And so I do think keeping the issues separate is probably a good idea. Thanks.
hearing quite a bit along those lines. Oh, go ahead, Warren. Sorry.
Go ahead, Tim.
Was just going to say that for a lot of reasons being expressed and also in the chat, seems to be the opportunity or the general consensus is to keep them separate. And we had kind of gotten to a good spot with B. I would suggest we kind of look back to C and try to go back to taking a look at it as a standalone issue brief or issue statement. What do you think, Warren?
No, I think this has been a really good discussion. I think, and Laura kind of helped me with some of my thinking there at the end, as well as some of the other comments. But just logistically, I think it would be easier having two separate briefs. Certainly, preparing them could be easier, and focusing and discussing them, I think, could be easier. So I think there's a benefit of keeping them separate at this point. And so Amanda, let's go ahead and go back down to statement C, and the next one, and one more. And so this is where we were. And Kathy, thank you for the comment. I don't see it as a problem. It was a good discussion, and appreciate that you're not wedded to it one way or the other. So this is where we left off with issue statement C. And I guess it just basically boils down to, is there a way that we could utilize the first part, the initial revised issue statement, and then maybe bring in some bullet points of that Cheryl and Doug and Sandy had suggested? Or are those points already captured when we're talking about supply availability up above? We reference costs borne by CAGRD and its members. That's referenced up above. Really, the only thing that's not in there is the reference to sufficiency of ADWR oversight and review of criteria of CAGRD plans of operation, which still doesn't mean we couldn't talk about that under the what is stated under the original revised issue statement. Doug Dunham has a comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna, Warren, just suggest that maybe to kind of cut to the chase is retain the initial statement above, and the three detailed pieces in the revised statement we submitted last week, just break those out as individual bullet points below that. It covers a little more detail. To me, when you just say long-term uncertainties, does that mean that there won't be any supplies for new members of GRD, or does that suddenly mean that the GRD's current supplies disappear? So I thought that the more detailed that we went into kind of covered some of that a little bit better. That would give us also an opportunity to actually look at what DWR and the GRD does in detail as when they go through the plan reviews. I think there's some kind of black box mystery to that. Maybe this could help solve some of the mysterious fears that people may have. So just a quick easy solution, just to stick those into sub bullets and then everybody go have lunch.
Okay. No, that's a good point, and we can do it that way. And certainly those points would be also noted in the issue brief itself. Also, any other thoughts regarding issue statement C, having it that way?
I like it.
I like it too. And we will see, Pam is asking if they can be phrased as non-yes, no questions like we did with B. And we will, I think we can do that. So, so why don't we, so one of the things that we would like to get thoughts on, though I think we've kind of indirectly been talking about it, is we wanted to get some ideas of any key points that you all feel should be brought in to the as we prepare the issue briefs. Certainly, those sub-bullets, these new sub-bullets for statement C are points that we would be addressing or describing in the issue brief. We have from the draft issue outline from last October, the one that generated 47 pages of comments. We still have all those comments to refer to. We have the feedback from the questionnaire. We have your comments and discussion and points that you have raised in the last 3 meetings. So all of that is going to be incorporated into the 2 issue briefs. So we're not theoretically starting from scratch. I feel like we're at a good place where we could then put that together, and then we will certainly, our plan is to then circulate with you a draft issue brief so that we can start briefs, 2 briefs, so that we can start getting your feedback, and would schedule a meeting in before, probably in the end of January or the first part of February, so that we would continue to have our discussion. So if you could go, Amanda, to the next slide. This was what we were kind of wanting to do on this slide, and then Amanda, go ahead and go to the next slide, was just see if there were any key points that anyone felt needed to be included in the brief. Again, recognizing that we have all the comments and everything that's been discussed up to this point. So feel free to reach out to Tim or I offline if you have ideas on that. But I'd like to make sure that we have enough time to touch on one more issue. And so, Amanda, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And that's in regards with the AMA management structure. So so this issue brief, we distributed to you in late October. We extended the deadline for feedback to December 1st, and we appreciated receiving comments. We received comments from 3 members, and those suggested changes will be incorporated into the brief, and then we plan to post this to the ADWR website. We feel like it's been very straightforward. This brief does seek to look at the management structure of the AMAs because the groundwater management code is silent after 2025. Obviously, the code remains in effect well after 2025, but this is our chance to consider improving the structure of the management periods and plans as well as goals. The comments we received were by and large supportive of the need for this committee to address this, while also remaining supportive of the programs that have been implemented under the management plans thus far. The intent is not to have the next phase of groundwater management lead to a complete overhaul of the current programs, but instead to consider new tools and strategies in order to better address the complex issues raised by this committee. For instance, as we look at the different issues we have identified, such as hydrologic disconnect, statement B, statement C, all of those, it is an opportunity to see if there are ways to address them within the management plans. And as we look at these issues, it is an opportunity to consider what management goal or goals would best serve each AMAs to guide us to address these issues and that are achievable and progress can be effectively measured. Obviously, as we move this issue into the solutions phase, we anticipate a lot of discussion and healthy debate about AMA management structure. Tim and I feel that this issue brief is fortunately quite straightforward and ready to be included along with the other finalized briefs in the packet for the council in March. But we wanted to see if there was any additional discussion that you would like to have on this subject. I'm lost the chat. There we go. It looks like Terry Sue is asking, can you summarize the comments? One was, yes, this needs to be looked at. Another one was concern of just wanting to ensure that this was not going, did not suggest that we were looking at a complete overhaul, which we are not, but wanted to also make sure that we were sensitive to all sectors and that we are making sure that whatever we're looking at has plenty of discussion and dialogue. Another comments had some more some suggestion on verbiage, as well as wanting to note that we would certainly want to make sure that conservation requirements would continue in new management plans and possibly look at how they could be improved. And as Carol just pointed out, the compiled comments are on the post 2025 documents page, and there's the direct link. Any other questions or comments? So why don't we go ahead and Amanda, let's go to the next slide. So next steps. Well, first off, we want to make sure that all of you enjoy and have a wonderful holiday season, and then be prepared around mid-January for us to review 2 new briefs. We'll be working to try to draft something in regards to Statement B and Statement C. I'm assuming in January we will not continue to call them Statement B and Statement C, but as I pointed out earlier, we know that many of the comments that we've already received and regarding the original brief, including a lot of the background information, we can utilize that. So again, your prior comments in reviewing and providing feedback will all still be utilized. And so we're going to target mid-January, and we will reconvene the committee to discuss those briefs and ultimately aiming to have everything for this phase finalized before the Governor's Council's next meeting on March 18th. And so that's where we're planning to go. And would also just want to point out that we are working hard in this committee. We really appreciate all of the time and thought that you have put in with your comments, and both written comments as well as verbal comments. We really feel that we've had some productive discussion that has really helped us get to this point where we've been able to fine tune and get to a couple more issue statements. And we're doing this because we take seriously the charge that was given to us by the governor for being members of the Governor's Water Council, and really want to take this opportunity that the council has presented for us all to look at issues after 2025 and see how we can continually strengthen water management here in Arizona, because we all want to be good stewards for future generations to come. And so I just want to say thank you again, and a big thank you to ADWR staff for helping with all of the logistics, running the technology, getting messages out to the committee, and really appreciate that. And wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a wonderful holiday season, and most of all, a really better new year. So, Tim?
Not much to add, just to echo your thoughts about where we're at, and we're on a good path, and looking forward to 2021 and getting to March with some meaningful input for the full council. And everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and we need you going into the next stage of the process. So we're grateful you're here. We're grateful for your participation and for all of your support along the way.
And I want to say thanks to everyone as well. The participation in this committee has been tremendous. And, we certainly couldn't do it without our co-chairs pushing forward persistently the way that they have. Thank you, Tim and Warren, and thanks to your staff for all of the support that they provide to this as well. We couldn't do it without the group effort that we have here.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone.
Take care.